Welcome to the Online Business Launchpad podcast. I'm your host, Trudy Rankin. And today's guest is someone who is an educator, a speaker, a facilitator, and a coach. And she is an educated and experienced advocate for women's health and fitness, which is something that we don't talk a lot about here on the podcast. But Tracy Minnoch-Nuku has had over 30 years in the fitness industry, and she started her career as a group fitness teacher and a personal trainer where she transformed bodies and lives through fitness and nutrition. And that's a really important part of some of the things we're going to talk about a little bit later. But she's also spent 20 years developing teams, fitness training programs in Asia, either live, online, or through fitness apps. And we'll talk about the fitness apps a little bit later as well. But Tracy has a deep interest in something that I think we don't talk about enough. And that is menopause and the effect that it has on women who are going through it and the people in our lives. Because menopause and the symptoms that we experience can really hugely impact our physical and mental health, our relationships, our careers. And I know that for myself, it was a really intense time that lasted over a number of years. I feel like I'm only just starting to come out the other side. But Tracy's own experience with menopause was really messy, and without any prior warning, her symptoms began to accelerate and negatively impacted her physical and mental health, her work life, and her relationships. And she's taken that experience and turned it into both a business, a podcast, and a book. And she uses all of that experience to basically help other women learn about menopause and how to deal with some of the things that it does to us. So welcome to the podcast, Tracy.
Thank you for having me, Trudy. Whenever someone does like an intro around yourself, it's like you're sitting back and reflecting and going, at this point in life, this is great. If this is my last day today, I think I've ticked a few boxes that I feel proud of. It's actually just a really nice thing. It's the first time I've even voiced that.
It's always interesting just hearing it from other people. And today we're going to cover a range of things, but one of the main things I want to focus on, that process of taking this menopause journey and turning it into a business that helps other people who are going through similar experiences. And as we get into this topic, maybe you could just give our listeners a little bit more information about where you're from and just that whole trigger point that got you going into this journey.
So I've always loved fitness from a very early age. As a dancer, as a triathlete, I went through university and did a degree in physical education. I was a part of Les Mills really early on. So Les Mills is the iconic fitness business in New Zealand, and now they're international. They've been international for a long time with their programming. So I was with them at a time where they were developing the international programs. I got picked up by an international business in Asia to go in and facilitate the trainings with the different programs like Body Pump, Body Combat, all the really well-known programs to help train up Asian instructors to teach. So that was a real dream job. I think that's not a common thing that happens. It's like shoulder tap, she can do this across multiple programs. Let's go. So I was newly married. And I said to my husband, we're out of here, we're going to Hong Kong. And I spent 5 years working for Fitness First Asia, setting up the company across their group fitness. My husband did the personal training. And then I left for a couple of years and did an MBA. I wanted to understand more about business. I've always been very curious around accelerating thoughts, processes, and operations. I've always enjoy that. Even though my background is physical education, most people assume it's all physical. I've always liked the processes of how do you get from A to B to C to D and make it profitable. So I took a couple of years off, and then Les Mills Asia Pacific, who are actually based in Australia, said they wanted to accelerate the business through Asia. And so I helped them set up a support office, and I came on board as the director for Les Mills Asia Pacific based in Malaysia, and accelerated the business right through Southeast Asia. After that, my husband and I both decided to do our own business in boutique fitness, which was really new. The only places that had boutique fitness was like New York and LA. And so we set up our own company. It's now an international brand. We sold and we came back to New Zealand. During the back end of that journey, while I was an entrepreneur, business owner with my husband, I started to go through perimenopause. Just to be really clear about what that means, I knew what the word menopause meant, but my understanding was it was someone who's in their mid-50s and they're going to get a bit tired and have some hot flashes and stuff. And that was pretty much all I knew. Now, I was 47 and I started to experience a whole lot of stuff going on that I couldn't make sense of. And being very in tune with my body, I noticed these things very clearly. Like over the period of a year, I would be up in the night sweating. I would be aching joints, sleepless nights, periods all over the place, mood swings, rage at my husband, forgetfulness, the times that I would forget content when I'm educating. Like that really blew my mind. Stuff that I had regularly taught, knew like the back of my hand, and now I couldn't remember it. And starting to have feelings of, I think I can't do this job anymore. I can't be this person anymore. So when I say these things now, I feel like, oh, that was meant to be. But in the moment, it's terrifying. And it went on for about 18 months before I started Googling. So many women do. What the heck is this? What is this? And then I came up against the word perimenopause. And I went down the rabbit hole. Why has nobody spoken to me about this? I'm in the industry of wellness, physical, mental, emotional wellness, like feeling good, using movement to feel good and using nutrition to feel good. Why am I not knowing about perimenopause? And so you mentioned how you take something like menopause and you turn it into a business. It was not on my dance card to create a menopause business. In fact, I would never in a million years think that I would be doing a business in menopause. So I started a podcast like you because I wanted to talk to people about this topic and also about aging. What does aging mean? And longevity and health. So it was a few topics that I was really curious about. They came from a deep personal perspective of how can I age the best that I can, and hence the brand name Sexy Aging. And that's the original podcast name and where everything else has come from. And a lot of people go, oh, why would you call it that? I'm like, because you can be both and it's whatever it means for you. So that's how Sexy Aging, the podcast, got going. And I started to dive a little bit deeper and talk to some experts on menopause health and all the topics that surround menopause. I spoke to a lot of women transitioning through menopause as business owners, as CEOs, and I started to get more than a picture of the physical role that menopause has and become more emotionally invested in what it means as you transition, because it's a natural stage of life. You'll transition through the perimenopause symptoms. You'll have your 1 day of menopause, 365 days without a period, and then everything in postmenopause where you really have to level up and take care of your health. I just started with the podcast and then I wrote the book because my husband got sick of me talking about it. And then I created an online course, a consumer course. So it's more around the everyday woman out there wanting to know, what is menopause and how do I look after myself? So I pulled in all my knowledge from fitness, health, nutrition, and created something that was evidence-based, supported by doctors. They endorsed my course and my book. And it's just really practical stuff. I'm not sure about you, Trudy, but do you remember being in the mix with the symptoms and not even knowing where to start to feel good? Just, oh, do I start exercising this way, or do I start eating that thing, or should I be fasting, or what the heck? So I just wanted to make it really simple for women. And I feel like I've achieved that, and it's a work in progress. I think the moment that I realized, hey, I could create a life for myself and continue to help humans, and in this perspective, menopausal women, with all the knowledge that I have and the experience that I've had and my personal experience with perimenopause, which I've been very open and honest about, I could create something where I get up every day and I spend time on that. And so when people say, why would you create a business out of menopause? I go, because it's so in me to do it that everything else seems mundane. So if I'm going to spend 8, 9, sometimes 14 hours a day doing things with menopause, education, conversation, creating tools and resources, I can get paid for it too. That's okay, because it's helping people. So I think they say some of the best businesses come from a place of purpose and passion. And this has probably been the most purposeful thing I ever remember doing. And that's where I'm at now. And there's a few other bits and pieces that I think we're going to be talking about. But I feel like I've been talking for a while.
I think it's really important to understand what the journey is and what sort of triggered the journey. And there's a few things that I'm going to follow up with in terms of questions, because listening to what you have to say about your particular journey, it really resonates with me, because I went through very similar things: sleeplessness, the forgetting of things, and that impacts your confidence at work. It does, and especially if you were in a senior management position like I was, pardon me, it really impacts your confidence. And I had to smile at the rage at the husband statement. It's just like deja vu. And for those of us who have that kind of a response to the changing of hormones in our bodies and things like that, it really has an impact on the people in our life who love us, who surround us, who support us. And I just know that for my husband, he had to go on a journey as well to try and understand what was going on, to try and cope. And then sometimes marriages break up, partnerships break up, and sometimes they survive. And it's just, wow, just the intensity of the whole thing. I'm curious, I'm just going to ask this as a question, because I don't see very much out there about how men can help women go through menopause, or how they can adapt and cope, assuming they want to stay in a relationship or they want to understand what's going on. How did you and your husband manage that whole process? And I know it's messy, but there's some people do manage to keep it together.
We definitely hit a juncture, and it's in my book. So some of it is about my libido, lack of intimacy, and just my sort of being all up in my head with stress, anxiety, forgetfulness, moodiness. Just being around him really aggravated me. So I feel like that probably speaks to a lot of women who are going through menopause that might not understand what's happening to them physically and emotionally. You just project it onto your significant other, as opposed to say to them, hey, I found out it's my hormones and it's going to do this to me. Look, as soon as I found that out, I came crawling back to try to fix or apologize for a few messy conversations that I instigated. My husband's incredibly patient and understanding. And as soon as I was able to, as soon as I could explain to him, I educated myself. Then it just all made sense. He was so empathetic, and he was like, what can we do? What are the options? What do you need? How do we do this together? So I'm really lucky in that way, but I believe that the hardest moments for a woman getting through that is actually just educating themselves and validating that the way they're feeling is genuinely happening. That is happening. It's not just a bad day, because it's going to go on for quite a few years. If you want to keep your marriage, then you need to educate yourself. And I believe we're at a bit of a juncture with the conversation on menopause generally, because I feel like it's trending and that we're having this conversation quite a lot. It's happening in the workplace. It's happening in just cafes, and women getting together to go out for a menopause walk. And these things are really happening. But the juncture is, where are the men in the conversation? And that is the next step, because when we look at the workplace, it's not unusual that there's still a lot of men in more senior positions. That's where we're at, and it's changing very slowly. But if we want men to support women who are experiencing menopause symptoms in the workplace, then they cannot be excluded from the conversation. We can't just go off and have our own workshop without including the men. I've been so lucky that I've taken a few workshops in the past where there have been men in the room or online, and they are quite vocal and they ask a lot of questions. The feedback has been incredible. And a couple of times, I remember two distinct moments where two men personally came up to me and said, you've just explained my wife, and I think you might have saved my marriage. And that's incredible, right? That's what I do. That's why I do what I do. Because when one person, he gets to go home and says to his wife, you won't believe what I learned. Shall we work this out together? That could just be life-changing for those guys. So it's quite a journey.
It is very powerful. And just getting that understanding can make people forgive a lot of things. My husband used to say at the end of the day, I've got a lot of bite marks today. It's just like,
That's actually really fun. When
it's
they
just like,
can turn it into something a little bit offhanded and just a bit more relaxed about it.
it took a while to get there because
Yeah.
at first it leaves people bewildered. You work together in a certain way for years, and then all of a sudden, just like that, everything that comes out of their mouth is the wrong thing.
Oh.
And it's this instant rage and instant fight, and they go, what did I do? I didn't do anything. I'm still the same person. And so it's really helpful. I think it is important for men to be involved in the conversation and to understand just it makes such a difference. And I also think that I agree with you, men need to be involved in the conversation, especially around work and the impact that menopause can have on women at work, women's careers, women who own businesses.
Yeah.
And I know for you, the menopause side of things helped you generate a business. Can you just talk a little bit about the impact of menopause while you were building that business?
It felt therapeutic to be. It still feels therapeutic. It feels like I get to navel gaze, for want of a better word, and create resources and content that speaks to other women who are experiencing very similar symptoms. And as I believe I'm coming to the back end of perimenopause because I have so much more clarity. I don't forget things anymore. I make decisions really quickly, and it's a really nice combination of gut, head experience, and all of that. There's some really good stuff that's happening for me personally that I believe it's because I'm coming to the back end of the symptoms. But I want to be really clear that I will never forget there were moments of pain and discomfort, and I can still see so many women going through that. Now, I don't want to do a pity party because I always create content that says, I see you, I hear you, and here's what I think you could be doing. And that's pretty much what I do every day. And I have a really, like when I say navel gaze, I have a think about a specific aspect of menopause, whether it be physical, mental, emotional, relational, career, and I'll create some content that speaks to women, whether it's through social media, blogging, podcasting. Like I get to do all of that, and that's creativity from personal experience. I just feel like it just doesn't get better than that.
It is really good to be able to just work on the stuff that I really care about and passionate about. I just want to come back to what you were saying, just that whole feeling that you're coming to towards the end of that sort of menopause journey and moving into the post-menopause phase. Because for me, as I said at the beginning, I feel like that's where I'm at.
Yeah.
You still think that it sometimes feels as though your menopause systems are just going to keep going forever and ever. But there was one thing at the beginning of my journey that made all the difference for me. And I was really fortunate that I had an older, more experienced female GP. And when I finally said, this is something so wrong here, I just don't know what to do. My life is upside down. Everything's just back to front. Told her what was happening and just said, it's ruining my life. And she just said, look, I promise you, at some stage, it will get better. And so just that knowledge that I just had to live through it, if I could just make it through long enough, hopefully trying to do things to reduce the pain, but eventually you get to the other side. And one of the things that I also think we don't talk about enough with menopause is that during that years-long journey, you have the opportunity to shape who you're going to be once you come through the other side.
Yeah, that's definitely the upside. And you start to see glimmers of it as you're coming through. You start to see, oh, hey, life is looking really good. There's a bit of a stripping away. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. I feel like at this stage of my life, I have such a much clearer understanding of who I am, what I care about, what I value, and what I'll stand for than I ever did in my life. How about you?
I agree. I've said this before. I'm very clear around my values, my purpose, and all of that. What's the irony, I think, because it's a business discussion as well, the irony is we get to this level of clarity. We don't take BS very well. We're just really clear about it. We can also Teflon, put it down to youthfulness or immaturity and be fine with it. We don't have to say anything. We get to the stage where, from a value perspective, as an employee or a business mind, you'd think that we would be highly sought after.
Tends not to be the case, but ageism for both genders or all the different genders, it doesn't matter who you are and how you see yourself. At least in Australia, we have problems with ageism.
Oh, we have that here too in New Zealand, for sure.
But
And definitely in the fitness industry.
of course, if you're over a certain age, you can't possibly be fit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which brings us quite nicely back to something that I wanted to talk about just a little bit. And that is that I know you have an app that you designed to be able to help people who are going through menopause. And I'd just like you to talk about it a little bit. Just tell us a little bit about how it came to be, how it works in order to help people, and what you want it to be able to do.
So it's a third-party app right now, and at the beginning, I'm at the entrepreneurial stage of creating an all-in-one stop cafe for menopause, fitness, and health. Basically, I have a third-party app, and I pile all my content in there. There's workouts, there's health tips daily, there's a community in there, which I think is really important, that we can talk to each other and they can talk to me. I create workout playlists to keep them motivated, and there's a whole lot of stuff that's in the app that I can store all my content on. My big picture is that I'll be eventually, maybe within the year, redoing that platform as my own. And so I've got quite lofty goals to do that. And I think what it comes down to is it cements my background and all my passions, fitness, wellness, nutrition for women, and takes that specific stage of life, menopause, which could be about 15 years, from the time that you go into pre-menopause, getting ready, right through to post-menopause. So a lot of content for that age range, which is a big segment of the world. 1 billion women by the year 2025 will be in the menopause life stage.
It's interesting to me that when I first started experiencing menopause, nobody was talking about it. It was just like this, it wasn't like secret or anything, just nobody talked about it at all. And you think about where women find out about the information that they need to know so that they can figure out what's going on, what they do to make their life better while they're going through it, what can they be looking forward to. And so, as you were mentioning earlier, it is definitely a trending topic. There's still gaps, I think, in some of the conversations, and we've touched on a couple of those. But having access to things like an app that can give you this information, one of my things that helped me is my sister gave me this big, huge, fat book about menopause. And that was the only resource that I had to be able to actually even try to do anything about trying to manage my symptoms or lessen the impact of the symptoms. And everybody's different, so not everything works the same way for everybody. So in terms of your goals that you've got for your app and that you want to do, obviously it's quite a big task. Take something from a third party that's hosted on third-party platform and turn it into something that's your own app that people can download onto their phone or their iPad or whatever and use it. What's one of your biggest challenges in terms of making that dream become reality?
I've just got over one of the very first challenges or hurdles, and that is to validate the concept. And I think when you get started as an entrepreneur, you get to play a lot. You get to be really flexible. You get to move in any direction you like. And I think as long as you know that's a part of building something, then you're okay to accept that it's not going to go like that straight away. You just get to play around. The validation part is, do people subscribe because it's a subscription-based model? Do they stick around? Do they give feedback? And do they connect their friends to it? So I think I've ticked the boxes with those things. The next part is to identify what's missing, like what could be better. And I'm so lucky that the Singapore University Entrepreneurial Studies group have actually taken Sexy Aging, the app, and they're creating a new prototype for me, which is super cool. And I'm not doing anything. And if the entrepreneurial journey, there's a certain amount of funding that you need. So I haven't had to do that part. And what they've come back to me with has just blown my mind. And so the next step is to, I think, increase the subscription on my current platform to a level. And then the investment part would definitely be how I'm going to reshoot content and get the app developed with everything, all the bells and whistles and all the wants and things that I want in there. I'm really lucky that I lived in Asia for 20 years. And so I have a really incredible network in Asia where I could probably do all of this stuff at half the price, basically. And plus there are really fantastic people up there to create the platform for me.
That's really cool in terms of where you're planning to go with it. I think it's going to be really incredible. And I find it interesting because people who have been listening to the podcast for a while know that I have a case study where I'm trying to rejuvenate or renovate an existing website. It's called the Menopause Effect, menopauseeffect.com, and take something that's been neglected for a long time and try and improve it. And one of the ways that we've been doing that is to try and put content up there that's going to be of interest and value to people. And we started doing some research into how other women from other cultures actually experience menopause and discovered that it's just not the same all around, which was news to me. And it's just really interesting to see how different cultures do that. The Indian cultures tend to experience, they do different things than we seem to have done in a Western world. And in your experiences in Asian countries and in your app development and stuff, do you bring that into play, the differences between cultures and how that they experience it differently?
I think what's really cool is because I have my podcast and I've explored those conversations already, cultural differences. I've talked to South Asian doctors from India. I've talked to Muslim women because I lived in Malaysia. So I actually already have those cultural conversations in my podcast. So all I do is take the link and I pop it into the app. And it's the same with blog posts or any other content that I've created, which might be relevant as reading material in the app. I also do research to validate concepts that women may be hearing about when it comes to menopausal health. I'll go to the research, summarize it. I'll share the link with them if they want to dive a little bit deeper. I start to do the sound bites and make it more simple. Not that people are simple, but I think when you've got a busy life and you're reading something on an app, you just want to get the fast fire facts and then go, okay, that's cool. I'm not going to do that diet because Tracy did the research and because of her background, it's probably not a good idea. So that's how I fulfill more content in the app. It's quite simple because we have our community. So I put things in there. As someone comes through, if they join the app as a subscriber, they go on quite a nice journey, like an introductory journey. So I start a bit slow and I just start with things like sleep and water. Let's just track your sleep and let's track your water, because as soon as we can do that with the exercise component, you're actually going to feel better in 3 weeks. I think I also want to be completely transparent. I don't discount HRT, hormone replacement therapy. I'm actually on it myself. I share that very openly in the book and the podcast. On the podcast, I go through the journey of finding out how to access HRT. I actually interview the doctors about it before I even start. That's been really cool. I see the menopause journey and the resources to support women. We're all having such a unique experience. I see those resources as the buffet. And you go, oh, okay, so I can take that supplement, or I can do that kind of workout, or I can take those medicines will help me. Instead of sitting on one side or the other, I'm like, here's the buffet. What do you want to try? And here's the research behind it. Go in with clarity and try some things.
Yes, absolutely. Because as I was saying earlier, we're all different and we all just experience things differently. I don't know. Humans are amazing individuals. It's really fascinating to see how we all respond differently. So one more really quick question before we wrap up, and that is, we've touched a couple of times on the whole need to keep men in the loop with the conversation, with the understanding, the training. Do you know of anyone who has something for men that they can go to and use as a resource for helping them understand the person in their life who's going through menopause or getting ready to go through menopause?
I personally can't think of any books or resources that speak to men directly, and I believe they're probably out there, because I don't think we can get through this conversation and leave them sitting on the bench. They need to run with us. They need to be our teammates in this journey. I can just do a little pitch for my own podcast. I interviewed my husband around my menopause experience and the symptoms that I had. It was like a test, and he had to answer yes or no. So I shared that with a lot of friends, and they shared it with their husbands. So that might be a fun, introductory, educational way to understand your wife's symptoms. And it's episode 10.
Episode 10. I will put that in the show notes, because this is just a shout out to anybody who's listening, who's looking for ideas. It's a gap in the market. And I think that somebody who was interested in that could actually do really well by helping to fill that gap and helping to educate men and women in terms of how men can be part of that journey. At the very least, how to survive it if their partner is going to.
I think there's also one point that we haven't really acknowledged, and I guess it's because we know that menopause can be really tough for women. Men are going through andropause, and that's a natural, slower decline of their own hormones, and we don't really acknowledge that and how that affects them. I guess we can probably say it's midlife crisis for men. That's the title we've given it. It's when they feel like they've lost a little bit of themselves, which is also how women feel, but we're not having that conversation together. Men just go out and get a younger version and a faster car and that sort of traditional holding on to their youth, versus, hey, I'm going through this. It doesn't feel comfortable, and it's called andropause.
Absolutely, it is a gap. It's been really interesting talking with you about just how you've set up your business, how you've gotten to where you are, and just menopause and the impact that it can have on people. If people are interested in learning more about you, getting in touch with you, or actually just finding out about your app, where would they go?
Everything is under sexyaging.com, and aging has an E.
Tracy, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. It's been really interesting.
Thank you for having me.